I'm Mayor Jim Fouts, and welcome to another edition of Fouts Forum. Today, we're going to discuss the upcoming November 4, 2014 election with Paul Woino, our city clerk, and we're going to explore some things that you may not know, some things that you may already know, and some things that you might want to be reminded about. So to begin with, I'd like to introduce Paul Woino, our city clerk. Welcome
Mayor,
to another edition of Fouts Forum, Paul. Paul, in my opinion, has done an outstanding job as city clerk and has been very much concerned with making sure everything flows smoothly, and I think you've done an outstanding job. I don't know anybody that's done as well as you have. He's clearly been a voter-friendly clerk. Paul, let's start out with the number one question that a lot of people ask this time of year, and that is, what will the voter turnout be this year compared to 2010? If we go back 4 years, we had a gubernatorial race in 2010. We had another one in 2014. At least the same person is on the ballot for both elections. That is Governor Snyder. He was the candidate, non-incumbent 4 years ago, and today he's the candidate. Since the governor's race usually draws people in, how does the voter turnout look this year compared to 4 years ago when I believe the opponent was Virg Bonero?
It's interesting. We have a large number of absentee ballot requests already that is comparable to what we had 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we had approximately 10,000 absentee ballots returned to us. And as we're taping this show, we're 2 weeks out from the general election. We've now sent out over 10,000 absentee ballot requests, which is somewhat unusual. As you stated, 4 years ago, we had an open seat in the governor's race. Now we have an incumbent that's running for re-election. Usually you see a drop-off in voter participation. It looks like we are looking at the same numbers from 4 years ago, or we may exceed the numbers from 4 years ago. 4 years ago in Warren, over 38,000 people participated in that gubernatorial election. And right now, I think we're on target to see those numbers again or possibly exceed those numbers.
I'd like to ask a comparison, and I don't know if you have the data available with you, but I'm curious. How would the 4 years ago election compare with the election for Barack Obama in 2008? Were there more residents that voted in the presidential election than the gubernatorial, and how many more?
Absolutely. 4 years ago in the gubernatorial election, we had approximately a 38% voter turnout. When Barack Obama first ran for president, we were in excess of approximately 65%. So it was almost close to double the number of voters.
So that also tells me that there are approximately 100,000 registered voters.
Yes.
Makes it easy for us to see how the percentage goes. All right, let's talk a little bit about the absentee voter. You did mention the absentee voter. What influences people to vote by absentee ballot to begin with?
I think voting by absentee ballot is a convenient way to vote. Many of the senior citizens that we have here in Warren, 60 years of age or older, each and every January we send out a card to people who have turned 60 years of age in the previous year asking if they'd like to be on the permanent absentee ballot list. What that entitles them to do, should they choose to be on that list, is each and every time we have an election here in Warren, they would receive an application automatically where they could choose to receive an absentee ballot for the primary or the general election or both. So it's a convenient way to vote.
All right, just to review, even though it's passed, what is the deadline for applying to get an absentee ballot, and what is the deadline for turning in your absentee ballot?
The last day that anyone can request an absentee ballot would be the day before the election. That would be Monday, November 3rd. In a case like that, they would have to come directly to our office because it'd be impossible to mail out an absentee ballot.
So people can continue to request absentee ballots right up till Election Day, but they must turn it in, I'm assuming, before 8 o'clock?
They must turn it in by 8 p.m. Election Day, which is November 4th. But the last day to request an absentee ballot would be the day before the election. The last day that we're permitted to mail out ballots to those who have requested it would be the Saturday before the election. Okay. I'd also like to emphasize that we are open from 8:30 to 2 p.m. the Saturday before the election. That's a requirement of state election law.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's important to repeat to residents that you can go to City Hall and the clerk's office will be open the Saturday before Election Day And that would be what,
November 1st
November
from
1st.
8:30 to 2 p.m.
8:30 to 2 p.m. That's the day after Halloween, so that's easy to remember. Now, the other thing that is interesting to note is that City Hall is closed on Election Day, but unfortunately, our clerk has to work, right?
We are open Election Day. Our staff actually begins working at 2 a.m. Down at our election garage, where the bags are set for pickup, and we have individuals down there and also in our office as well. Our lines are open, so if anyone has any questions, if they're not sure of their voting location, they can call us at 574-4557, or they can come into our office. We are open on Election Day.
Let me ask one other question related to absentee ballots. What is the reason for being able to get an absentee ballot? You just can't request one, you have to have a reason, right?
There are several different reasons to request an absentee ballot. First, being 60 years of age or older, being physically unable to attend the polls on Election Day, you're out of town on Election Day, you cannot attend because of reasons of religion, or that you're awaiting arraignment.
Arraignment, okay. Let me ask this. Here's a good question, and I don't know if you can answer it. Why do we make people give us a reason? Why can't they just request an absentee ballot and get one, period? Why do we make them give us a reason?
I know both of you and I agree on this, that there should be no reason absentee ballot.
I feel if somebody wants an absentee ballot, whether they're, and why, by the way, what's the magical difference between 59 and 60? And why is 60 the magical age? Why not 70? Why not 80? Why not 90? Why not 40? Whatever. I believe that the legislature should change that, and it should just be, you want an absentee ballot, period. You shouldn't have to give a personal reason as to why you need one.
Absolutely, and going back to the time when I served in the legislature, as far back as 1996, 97, legislation was introduced each and every session to adopt no reason absentee ballot voting. And it's always been met with partisan differences, and it's never been able to pass both chambers and get the governor's signature.
Let me ask this, partisan differences, which party tends to be favor it and which party tends to oppose it?
The Democratic Party favors no absentee, no reason absentee ballot voting, where the Republican Party, for the most part, has opposed no reason absentee ballot.
So it's been a partisan issue.
Yes.
Well, that needs to change. It needs to become a nonpartisan issue, and everybody should be given the opportunity to vote by absentee ballot, irregardless of age or reason.
Absolutely. As we said, it's a convenient way to vote. There are some states that have voting by absentee ballot exclusively.
And I think we should be amongst those states. Let's go to another thing. We were talking earlier, and Mr. Woino, City Clerk Woino, pointed out an item that I was not aware of, and I'm somewhat outraged about, and that is that there has been a major change in this ballot, and the major change is there's no directions. Now, I don't understand why our legislature, why the Board of Canvassers, why would they decide that they should remove directions for voting? I mean, voting is a very precious right. There's a lot of people that may not understand the difference between partisan and nonpartisan. They may not understand that they can only vote for one. They may not understand, probably the most important question is, do I have to color in the circle, or can I just put a check, or what have you? So explain what the directions were, if you can remember, and why do we not have directions anymore?
Well, we don't have directions because, as you stated, the legislature made the change. I think it was an unfortunate change.
And how profound is this change? What did the directions used to say?
Yeah, well, depending upon the election, there's different directions for each election. It was a change that I did not support. There are many clerks around the state that did not support the change. But in the past, as you stated, you'd receive your absentee ballot, and the directions were printed at the top of the ballot.
Which is where they should be.
Absolutely. And for example, in a primary election, you cannot split your ticket. And oftentimes, a voter may forget that they don't have the ability to split that ticket as they do in the general election.
And then the ballot
The directions would remind them of that. So now directions have been removed, and that was done, again, legislatively.
Well, what is the rationale? I'd like to know what in world's reason
The
would there be to
rationale
change.
that the legislature used was that they felt that there should be more real estate, so to speak, in preparing the ballot. They felt that space was sometimes limited. Very few times are there two ballots that need to be issued. We did see that in the presidential election in Detroit. They needed to issue two ballots. Here in Warren, since I've been clerk, we've never had to issue two ballots. And as long as I can remember being involved in local politics, I don't remember two ballots being issued
Give me some
here in Warren.
examples of what the directions would say or should say. Can you remember?
Well, what the directions state for the general election is it tells you, and we put the directions now on the secrecy
So
sleeve.
you put that yourself.
We put this ourselves.
I want to commend you. In other words, City Clerk Woino did more than what was expected. You want to make sure the voters understand, but it's still not on the ballot. But go ahead.
No, but we placed the directions on the ballot, and in a general election, you can vote a straight party ticket. You can color in a party preference, and then later on in the ballot, you can still split your partisan vote if you choose to do so. But the directions also explain that we have a partisan section, we have a nonpartisan section, which is our judicial races and our proposals. But depending upon the election, directions are different, whether it be a primary election, a general election, a school board election, or a presidential primary. So there's different sets of directions that we need to print up and place on the secrecy sleeve and mail it out to the
Now, the
voter.
legislature, in their questionable wisdom, I used to say infinite wisdom, in their questionable wisdom, have decided that voters need no directions for voting. That is fundamentally wrong.
I think it was an unfortunate mistake, and again, something that I opposed. I would hope that our future legislators may take a look at this, since we do have a change coming up in Lansing, a large number of new state representatives coming in to put the elections back, or the directions back on the ballot.
And you know, that reminds me of another issue that I got involved in, and that was the issue involving Proposal 1. When they put ballot language in that was frankly confusing, they referred to a stabilization act. No one knew what the stabilization, I have a copy of this ballot from August, and I believe it stated that they would be voting for a local community stabilization share. No one knew what the stabilization share was. They talked about other things that were confusing, and Proposal 1 was confusing. As far as I'm concerned, the legislature is attempting subtly to confuse the electorate in this election by leaving directions out. And directions should be clear, and ballot proposals should be clear. The ballot should not be confusing. I've never heard of not having directions. End of editorial comment there.
In some ways, it's a move to where disenfranchises the voter.
Well,
and as you said, it does
think
cause voter confusion.
I think the big question is, does our legislature want to have an informed electorate, or do they want to have a confused electorate? And these two examples, Proposal 1 on the August 5th ballot and no directions on this ballot, are two examples of attempting to have confused voters rather than informed voters. All right, let's go ahead. Let's talk about, you just mentioned it, and I want you to explain it again. You can't do this in the primary, but you can't do this, you can do this in the general election. What do you mean by voting a straight ticket, and what do you mean by voting a split ticket?
In the primary election, you have to vote a straight ticket, meaning if you choose to vote in the governor's race for the
You
Republican,
have to either vote Democrat or
Republican, or any of the other parties, the Libertarian Party, the Taxpayers Party, the Green Party. Once you choose a party designation, you cannot switch over to another party.
But in the general election, you can still vote straight or split, so explain that difference.
In the general election, you can vote the straight party ticket.
Now, what does it mean? If I just want to vote straight party, what does that mean?
That means you're either voting for the straight Republican candidate, the Democratic candidate, the Libertarian candidate, U.S. Taxpayer Party candidate, the Green Party candidate, or the Natural Law Party
All right, that
candidate.
means that if I color in the, let's say I decide to vote Libertarian and I color that space in, that means all the Libertarian candidates in this ballot will get a vote.
That is correct. However, if you change your mind halfway through the partisan ballot and wish to choose perhaps a Republican or a Democrat, you do have that ability. You can color in that candidate's oval and all the other candidates that you checked as a libertarian would get that vote, except for the category where you chose to vote another party.
Okay, that's
So,
it. That's
so even
interesting.
halfway
So it-
through your straight party
So if I vote straight party, but I decide that for U.S. Senator and congressional representative, I want to split the ticket, those two are separate and everything else is listed as
Absolutely.
straight. Okay, that's good to know. I didn't know that. Let's talk about the fact that the ballot is really divided into three parts: partisan, nonpartisan, and proposals. Would you explain? Let's start with partisan. What do we mean by partisan?
Our partisan offices, of course, are governor, secretary of state, attorney general, U.S. Senate, our congressional seats, and then our state house seats, state senate, county commission.
Now, partisan means you have to run under a party designation.
Absolutely.
So partisan means I choose between Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or what have you. It has to be a specific party.
Yes.
All right, and nonpartisan obviously means
Nonpartisan is our judicial section, our Supreme Court, our circuit court, our district court races, and then we have the school board, and then also our proposals.
and nonpartisan means you don't take a political position.
That is correct.
You want both Democrat, well, you always want both Democrat and Republican votes, but in this one, you are staying away from any
You don't run under any of
inkling
the party
yeah.
designations. One thing that is interesting in the partisan ballot is that not all the candidates fill all of the slots for the partisan ballot. So you will see some partisan offices where they're perhaps just a Republican and a Democrat running, no one else.
And proposals.
And the proposals are on the back
Proposals
of the ballot.
are really nonpartisan, but a proposal is, can I define it this way, and I want you to correct me, can I define a proposal as an amendment to our state constitution?
Depending upon whether it's a state proposal or yes,
Or-
a referendum,
or a
ballot
referendum, okay.
referendum that changes
That's
around
right, it's not always,
certain aspects
it's
of
not
state
always
law.
an amendment. And let's go right to the proposals now.
Sure.
And I see we have basically two proposals all dealing with, looks like legalizing the hunting of wolves. So this really is not a constitutional provision, is it?
No.
This is just an action, just like if they took a proposal a few years ago and legalized medical marijuana, right?
Exactly.
So that wasn't a constitutional, that
different.
was just legalizing something. So in this case, the two proposals, correct me if I'm wrong, because I just skimmed at them. The first one basically states that that wolf hunting will be legal, and the second one is about how they're going to do it. Is that right or wrong?
Yes, it's set up an annual wolf hunting season. So basically, they're asking whether or not we should
Kill wolves. That's what
have
it
a
is.
wolf hunting season here in the state of Michigan to be on an annual basis. The second proposal that ties into that is that the Natural Resource Commission would then be designated to
Supervise or
oversee, and designate wolves as game. Now, what's interesting is at the very end of the second proposal, the last line says, should we also give the Natural Resource Commission sole authority in this state to regulate fishing?
That's
So you can
wild.
see how
yeah,
some
now
things,
that's almost like
again,
a proposal one.
it
It's
shows
confusing.
your example explicitly where...
Why do you get
at face
fishing? Why do you throw fishing in with wolf hunting?
Exactly. At face value, an individual may think they're voting strictly on wolf hunting, and unless they read the wording correctly, the very last sentence in the second proposal also gives the authority to the Natural Resource Commission to be the sole authority to regulate fishing here in the state of Michigan. That means to make decisions on licensing, all other aspects
Who
of the fishing
currently
industry.
is the authority for fishing now?
The legislature has played an active role at times as it relates to licensing, regulation, and so now basically they're turning over everything to the Natural Resource Commission.
Now
in
that,
just one line.
that is amazing that you would throw fishing in with hunting of wolves.
But also
That's
proves-
apples and oranges.
And it proves your point,
Yeah.
as you talked about Proposal 1 in the August primary, and how removing the directions on the ballot, and then again sliding in a complete major change with just one sentence.
It's really the shameful actions of the legislature that would allow voter confusion to continue. But sliding in fishing with wolf hunting is apples and oranges, makes no sense at all. All right, I did want to discuss a little bit with you about levels of government. In this ballot proposal, it basically involves the election of every level of government except city. You want to go through those, again, the levels of government?
The level of government that we have is our federal level.
Right, that would be U.S. Senate, Congress.
Our state level,
Which would be governor,
Secretary of State,
Attorney General.
State Representative, State Senator, and then our county level, which we have our county executive on the ballot, we have the county commissioners on the ballot, and then we have our school board on the ballot at the local level.
Well, that would be school level.
School level.
Right. The one level that's not on this ballot is city.
That's right.
Just to remind everybody, there's 5 levels of government. National, which includes U.S. Senate and Congress. State, which includes governor, secretary of state, attorney general, state representative, state senate, and the state judicial races. And then county executive, county commission, and then school, which would be the school board, but also
Our nonpartisan judicial section, which is the 5th area as well.
All right, now let's talk about hot races in the election. Obviously, the hottest race for most people would be governor. Let's talk about that. We have Mark Schauer, who is the Democratic challenger, running against Governor Snyder, the incumbent Republican governor. What can you say about that race? The polls have shown until just recently that it was close to a dead heat. It seems like the governor is now pulling ahead, although maybe later there'll be a poll that'll show that that's changed. But how does that influence the electorate when we have a hot election?
I think it encourages more individuals to come out and vote. The race is a close race. 4 years ago, Governor Snyder won with 61% in Macomb County. I don't think the winner in this gubernatorial election, whether it be Governor Snyder, whether it be Mark Schauer, is going to have that margin of victory here in Macomb County. I think, as you mentioned, the polls are tightening up, and it will be, I think, a closer election than individuals anticipate.
Well, let me ask this. You said it was 61% in Macomb County. I'm assuming that Warren is more Democratic, so did Governor Snyder win Warren, or did he win by that margin?
Governor Snyder won Warren 4 years ago against Virgil Bonero. He put up approximately a little more than 20,000 votes, and Virgil Bonero put up a little bit more than 17,000 votes here.
So was it a little closer then? Or?
Absolutely.
It was 57%?
It was a closer race between the two candidates here in Warren than it was countywide. But looking at the large number of absentee ballot requests that we have with an incumbent at the top of the ticket in the gubernatorial race, I think that there's a greater interest in this race, more individuals wanting to participate.
All right, let's talk about U.S. Senate. That's somewhat of a hot race, not as hot as a governor. What would you say about that? We have Terry Lynn Land, the former Secretary of State, running for U.S. Senate in the vacated seat of U.S. Senator Carl Levin, who's been our U.S. Senator for a long time, the younger brother of Senator Levin, who's still our congressman, and of course Gary Peters, current incumbent congressman, who's now running for U.S. Senate. Where do you see that going?
I see that race, I think, from what the polls have indicating, is widening towards Congressman Peters. They had not had the ability to debate like they did in the gubernatorial election. I think there was some criticism of one of the candidates where they did not want to participate in a debate. But I think looking out 2 weeks now from the election, it seems that most polls indicate that Gary Peters right now is the favorite. But we know things can change on a dime. At one time, Jim Blanchard had a double-digit lead 2 weeks prior to the election against John Engler, and he lost against John Engler.
All right, another hot race is Circuit Court Judge. We have Massaroni running against Fox. What's Fox's first name
Steve
again?
Fouts.
And what's Massaroni's first name?
The Jim.
Jim, okay.
Jim Massaroni.
Now, this is an interesting race because Massaroni's father, what is his father's name again?
His father's name is Pete, and
Peter
Pete is stepping down.
Massaroni is term limited. Well, he's limited because of age. He can't run again.
That's correct.
So he's running his son. And Fox is a county prosecutor.
That's correct.
And the interesting thing about this is, in the signs, Massaroni doesn't say he's the current judge because he isn't. That's his dad. And he doesn't even say his first name, which is why I don't know his first name. And he just puts judge the best, which is an interesting ploy, isn't it? It's hard to judge somebody the best if you've never been a judge before, right? So it goes back to kind of a name game that the judges play. Most of the judges in Macomb County are sons and daughters of judges who have retired. And this is another case. Would you add that?
In this particular case, we actually had calls when the signs went
Yeah.
up as to what the person was
Right.
running
He
for.
just says judge best. He doesn't say he's a circuit court judge. And I guess that's to avoid putting down his name, which some people then might realize it's not his father running. He's running for his father's seat. But then if we look, you can look at the circuit court. They're all sons and daughters of previous judges. It's hard for someone who's not the son or daughter of a judge to get elected, right, on surface value.
I think that holds true also in most any type of elective race where you have a family member seeking
Well, it seems
office.
to be very
But
strong
You do
in
see a
Macomb
large
County.
number of individuals whose parents were in the judicial
It's almost
system
like
serving.
it's become JFK, jobs for kinfolk, right? You know, that kind of thing. All right, let's go to district court. We don't have sons and daughters running. In that case, we have the incumbent, Mr. Ausilio, running against
Suzanne Fouts.
Suzanne Fouts. I started to say her sister's name. Now, that's an interesting race because Suzanne is the sister of the previous Fouts, and her name was what again?
Jennifer.
Jennifer Fouts, who got appointed to the circuit court by Governor Snyder, and then Governor Snyder appointed Ausilio to replace her. And now her sister is wanting to replace Ausilio, and Susan, or Jennifer rather, replaced her father, Sherman. So you have a little bit of a family seat. First there was Sherman, then there was Jennifer, and now Susan is trying to replace Jennifer, who was replaced by Ausilio, who was appointed by Snyder, who appointed Jennifer. So,
And I kept up with you on all that.
Okay.
And as you indicated, and the papers have said so as well, that this is also one of the more competitive judicial
very
races.
competitive.
The circuit court race with Fox and Massaroni, they say, is competitive. And they say that the district court race between Suzanne Fouts and Judge Ausilio is a competitive race as well.
I would think that the race for a district court judge is the most competitive district court race we've had in years, because in many cases, for district court, they don't even get an opponent. They file in May and they're elected. And so this is highly competitive. I would predict that whoever gets their vote out wins. I would be surprised if a few hundred votes separates these two. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think it'll be a very close race.
And so you have incumbent Judge Dean Ausilio running against Susan Fouts.
Yes.
And we'll see how that goes. Now, another competitive race is the race for Warren Consolidated School Board. Now, usually the school board races are given. The teachers union recommends someone, and they win by a few hundred votes, and there's usually not any controversy. In this one, we have 8 candidates running for 4 seats. To begin with, this is highly unusual because I don't think there has ever been a situation where the majority of the school board is up at one time. That's just unusual, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think what's so interesting about this,
And also they're designated. You can't vote you have to vote for 2 parts, right? Like a judge would do, right?
Yes.
Why don't you go into that one?
but what I was going to say is in the past, so many of our school board candidates ran in spring, and they're very low voter turnout. To have a November election where we have a large voter turnout, to see 8 candidates on the ballot in the Warren Consolidated school race is highly unusual. And we have 2 candidates that will be running to fill a term of 6 years, and then 2 candidates that will be running to fill a term of 4 years.
Now let me ask you this. I find it highly unusual that there's a 6-year term. Why is there a 6-year term? I thought the most school board had was 4 years. How did they develop a 6-year term?
That is designated by the state where the terms of office are staggered, and not everyone expires on the same at the same time.
And this was mandated because the state mandated that school board elections be held in November rather than in May or the spring or whenever they usually
That is
were.
correct. And since we've had the candidates now move to the November election, it's an unusual case where we are having the 6-year term and the 4-year term on the ballot together. But 4 years from now, of course, we won't have the 6-year
All
term
right, so
members,
I
or vice
would
versa.
urge all Warren Consolidated voters, and I think those are the only competitive school elections, to really do your homework in this, because we have 4 challengers running against the incumbents. I'm going to take a chance, and I think I can pick the incumbents. The incumbents are, for the 4-year term, are Brian White and Carl, Weckerly, and the challengers are Catherine Schwab and Timothy Schwartz. And then for the 6-year term, the incumbents are Sue Catula and Elaine Martin, and the challengers are Laura Hawadama, I think that's how we pronounce it, and Andrew Locks. And that's a big race because it involves issues involving the deficit of the school district and the performance of the students and some other issues. So I would think people would want to pay close attention. And what it really amounts to, do you favor the incumbents or do you favor the challengers? And I don't think, is there any other school board race that has that big of a difference?
Not at all. And Warren Consolidated, of course, is the largest school district here in the city of Warren. Our other school districts do have races as well: Van Dyke, Warren Woods, Fitzgerald, and Center
But not that competitive.
Not as competitive as what we see in Warren Con. It's very unique to see all the incumbents being challenged. And as you said, there are a lot of hot-button issues,
A lot of hot-button issues.
In this race. And I think we're going to see a large voter turnout for school board in Warren Consolidated.
Although, let's add this, you know what I'm always concerned about, the front of the page is basically the partisan ballot issues. The back of the page is something that voters could miss. Is there a big drop-off from voting for governor and then voting for school board?
There's a big drop-off from voting for governor to state representative. And yes, absolutely.
How big is the drop-off? How big would the drop-off? Let's say that you get 38,000 people to vote for governor. How many people would vote for school board?
Well, considering it doesn't take in the entire city of Warren, but I would say the drop-off could be anywhere from 30 to 40% at times.
So it's a big chunk.
Yes.
So voters should remember to go to the back of the page and vote for school board. We focused on Warren Con, but there's Fitzgerald School Board, there's Lincoln Van Dyke School Board, and there's Centerline.
And Fitzgerald,
Fitzgerald,
Woods.
you know, what have you.
And it's so important to take an active role in voting for that election. We pay school taxes just as we pay city taxes as well, and it's a very critical, important vote to be informed on the school board members that are running for office.
All right, last but least, since we mentioned school board and we did go into the judges a little bit, we should mention community college. Now, in the community college, how many people can they vote for?
Well, they can vote for not more than 3 for the
And
community
you've got
college
how many challengers?
board of trustees. And quickly, we have at least 10 individuals, it looks like, that are on the ballot. I won't count them one at a time here, but you cannot vote for more than 3. And also, the Macomb County proposal is to reestablish a charter commission and elect another charter commission to review the county charter as well. And that's a controversial proposal.
Why don't you explain can you explain the pros and cons about the charter commission?
Well, the Charter Commission would be entrusted to
Rewrite the city.
rewrite the county charter, which was done
Just a few years
several
ago,
years
yeah.
ago. So this would be going back, electing a new Charter Commission, and then that Charter Commission would be entrusted to rewrite the county charter and then submit it to the voters for approval.
So rewriting the county charter could have could extend terms. It could potentially raise salaries. It could do a number of things.
Yeah, a number of different things.
So it's something the voters should look at. I see our time is up. Actually, we've run over by a few minutes. So Paul, I'd like to thank you again for giving our voters another highly informed presentation on what's going on in the ballot on November 4th, and that's coming up. It'll be I always like to remind people, it's right after Halloween. The election comes after Halloween. What was it that, the humorist, the humorist once said, he said, the difference between Halloween and Election Day is on Halloween they wear costumes and on Election Day they don't. So I'm not sure what he meant by that. But at any rate, it is coming up. Please do your homework. I often used to say this when I was a government teacher. I used to tell my students it was important that you vote, but it was more important that you do your homework and you read up before you vote. And as Paul said to me earlier, he said that it would be ideal for most people if they want to avoid lines and avoid a lot of the problems that take place on Election Day, that probably you should vote by absentee ballot, and then you have plenty of time, you don't feel rushed, and you don't have to do anything like that. So do you have any other comments you want to make about predictions for Election Day? What do you predict, and what do you encourage people to do? Maybe we should say this. I just thought of a couple of other important questions. If you have a concern on Election Day, what should you do about that concern?
If anyone has had any concerns, questions, we encourage them to call our office at 574-4557. Also, if they are at the polls and they have any concerns or the questions, we have our precinct captains there that can answer questions. If they can't answer that question, we will have the precinct captain either contact myself or my deputy clerk, one of the individuals in the office, to make sure we answer any and all questions on Election Day for the voter.
And last but not least, when can everybody get the election results, and who will give the election results to? Will they be on cable? Will you announce them? How will we get the results?
Things have changed with the voting process now, the voting machines that we have. The memory cards, the results are modemed over to the county. Once the county posts those results, they will have them on the county website as well.
Do you have a rough guesstimate if the polls close at 8, how soon can we find out the results so that we can celebrate the governor's victory or the governor challenger's victory?
Results start coming up on the website in about 45 minutes to an hour. Okay. But there are times where we modem the results over. We get clearance from the county that they've been received, but yet they may not be posted for another 20, 30, 40 minutes.
All right. With that in mind, I thank Paul Woino again for coming today, and I remind you, the voters, to make sure you do your homework. Get a copy of a sample ballot, get a copy of the absentee ballot, but do your homework and then vote. But it's informed to be an informed voter, and unfortunately our legislature has made it a little bit more difficult to be an informed voter when there's no directions and when the ballot continues, at least in part, to be confusing. So good luck on Election Day, and may the best woman or man win. Thank you again, Paul Woino, City Clerk.